I think this is the first 100-point result we've had come up and had to talk about since the channel's been going, since 2018, Squid Rugby. Ireland beat Portugal 106-7.
Yeah. It was really, really bleak. That there is such a thing as an absolute drubbing that I quite enjoy watching.
Sure,
For instance, in the last World Cup, there was New Zealand putting 93 points on Italy. That was quite enjoyable.
They were just exceptional.
That was one of the best team performances I've ever seen in the history of rugby, right? Even though Italy scored a fair few points themselves. But with this, I took genuinely no joy in it. And that's nothing against Ireland.
And I'm sure there are Irish fans who did.
Yeah. Ireland were brilliant, right? That goes without saying. Ireland were brilliant, but also no, they didn't need to be brilliant. They didn't need to be at the top of their game because there's something extremely sour on this. And look, we don't need to waste any time. We can get right into this. I looked at this fixture as a setup, and I was looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed Ireland-Georgia as a fixture last week. I think that Georgia really played their part in that. And if you look at Portugal in the Rugby Europe Championship, they're typically always in the top four, if not kind of touching the top with... They've had it before where they've competed well with Georgia in terms of winning that championship. In the last World Cup, they beat Fiji. They could have beaten Wales, back when Wales were good. They could have beaten Australia. They were a good team in that World Cup. And a lot of the players who played there and have played at high standards of rugby were playing in that game yesterday. So I looked at the team sheet and I thought, Ireland don't have their Lions. They've even rotated out a few of the players that were starting against Georgia in the absence of those Lions. This could be a really good game here. And I didn't think Portugal would win, but I thought Portugal would give them a good game.
Yeah.
I thought it would be really competitive and it maybe be a similar scoreline to what they gave Georgia last week.
Yeah, and I thought Portugal would score some tries in response and it'll be quite open.
Yeah.
However,
because there are good players in that Portugal team.
There are.
But I looked at that team sheet, and before this, and I will get ridiculed in the comments for this, I looked at that and thought, that's a good Portugal team.
Yeah, and it is. Those players are good and they're much better than this. And I think, ultimately, right, when we did our deep dive on the history of Portuguese rugby before the last World Cup, I very much bigged them up and talked about why, they'll be your new favourite team. One of the things that came up is... in qualifying for the 95 World Cup, rugby in Portugal had been on the rise. And then they played Wales as for the last European spot, or for European spot. If they'd beaten Wales, they would have qualified for the World Cup for the first time. As it was, Wales won by over 100 points. And that game became such an embarrassment to Portuguese rugby, it set them back a generation. Yeah. You had a generation of fans and players who gave up on the sport, who left it, who just thought there was no hope in it. And I think there's a genuine worry that we've seen history repeat itself.
Yeah.
That a Six Nations team come over and through any number of circumstances led to them winning 106-0. There was a phrase in Lina de Ensaio, which is a big Portuguese rugby blog, which their write-up on this piece ended, and I thought it was incredibly well put. They say it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. Well, the Portuguese Rugby Union might have just ruined it in 80. And I worry that is what's happened. I worry this was like a monumentally catastrophic day for Portuguese rugby. Yeah. And we can talk about Ireland a little bit, but the story here was Portugal because they were so powder puff and so empty. And this wasn't a performance you can look at and go, well, they were shit, they were terrible, and be angry about it. You were just they couldn't front up in any regard. The ease with which Ireland walked through them, it's almost hard for Ireland to take much from it. That you wonder, if this was the British Irish Lions trained against the Portuguese national team, right? That seemed like a good first hit out for them. If they were like this, then who knows? But you just I don't know, there's been more and more given to Portugal and more built around Portugal over the last few years. And just I can't believe how gutted and kind of shell-shocked by how poor they were.
Yeah. For a bit of context, so some people may remember earlier in the year, England 15, so England A, played against a friendly test match at Welford Road against Portugal. And they were billed as Portugal, right? But this game took place the week before the Rugby Europe semi-final.
Yeah.
So Portugal sent out what was essentially their third team.
Which that essentially acted also as a World Cup qualifier.
Yeah.
Like if they made that spot, they qualify for the World
Yeah.
Cup. So.
And even for the Rugby Europe Championship itself, Portugal had quite a depleted team that they are quite back and forth with how much they're allowed access to the players they have playing in the top 14 in the Pro de Deux and in various other leagues around the world. Federation, yeah, indeed. And so, and they had a lot of injuries and like they have a couple of players who've weirdly been on sabbatical and so on. There's all sorts of unavailability that they had for that championship.
It was the one positive, again, comes up in the blog, but like Nuno Sousa Guejas played his first game for Portugal since the World Cup.
Yeah.
Won his 50th cap. Yeah. Like that was a great occasion. He was superb. He was the one Portuguese player who kind of like.
So with all of that, England battered Portugal.
Yeah.
Let's call them Portugal A.
Yeah.
Because
which is what they were, realistically.
That's what they were. It was realistically, if you were to send a team to the World Cup, that would have been about their third string 15, Portugal. And you go, well, of course they're battering them because you've got amateur players or players who are used to playing in the Portuguese league and they're playing against Caden Murley, Guy Pepper, Ben Spencer, Harry Randall, against these sorts of players who play week in, week out in the Premiership. And that is expected. That you forgive. You go, well, this fixture probably shouldn't have happened like this in the first place. There should have been a better way of putting this fixture together, right? If you then go back a little bit further, last year, the Springboks played against Portugal and put about 60-odd points on them. And that was closer to a Portuguese proper 50.
Yeah, they had a lot of their first-choice players out. They scored a few tries in riposte. They were good fun.
But they were playing against the Springboks.
Yeah.
And, you know, that they had world-class players all across the board.
It was a closer to full-strength version of the Springboks, who are world champions, than it was Ireland here.
Yeah. And you look at this, right, and the 15 that Portugal had out, you got Tomas Appleton, who is one of the most experienced players in the history of Portuguese rugby. He's their captain. He's been brilliant. He was so good in the last World Cup. You mentioned there Nuno Sousa Guedes, who is a fullback. He was phenomenal against Wales in the last World Cup. As you say, he was quite redeeming because he had a couple of really good runs on the ball. He was good.
Yeah.
And he made like 2 or 3 clean breaks. And I don't think you can quite say a fullback played very well when his team conceded 106 points.
Yes.
And some of those were from aerial contact.
It's all relative, isn't it?
But yeah, regardless, there like Cardoso Pinto, for example, who is a brilliant player and so entertaining. You've got Nicolas Martench, who was genuinely one of the best players in the pool stage of the last World Cup. Full stop. Not just for Portugal, but full stop was one of the best players in that whole pool stage. You have so many players in this Portugal team that you look at and you're like, they should be competing with these players. You don't just look at it and go like, oh yeah, but they had Craig Casey, they had Jack Crowley. Because these guys are brilliant players, okay? But it's not like it's a complete gulfing class to the guys that Portugal had out. And yet, they played so poorly and it was so disappointing.
The margin should have been 20 to 30 points at most.
Yeah.
And instead it was 99.
50 points plus would have been a great result for Ireland.
Ireland were incredibly accurate. I think there was a bit of reaction to the Georgia game. I think they were just like on it and they were switched on the entire time. Craig Casey was superb. I'm not sure if he was given man of the match, but like it felt like it was fairly clear to me that he was there.
Broke a record for assists in one game, which is pretty impressive for an Irish player. That is
first time Ireland ever scored 100 points as well.
Yeah,
they were the last Tier 1 nation to do it apparently.
Yeah,
so
good for them.
Again, wish it didn't happen in these circumstances. You know, wish it had happened against like New Zealand. I don't know.
Sure. Tommy O'Brien, I thought was excellent as well.
Yeah.
And a word for Shane Bolton as well. This tweet I found very entertaining, saying that every single time he started for Ireland, they've scored 100 points and won.
Yeah. So like from an Irish point of view, great, solid performance. You come in delighted with them for your Paul O'Connell. Or if you're Farrell or whoever watching.
Imagine he was in there just like, lads, that wasn't very good.
Yeah, you can't ask for any more.
No,
I don't think they learned anything. I don't think any of those players are any better or any more experienced in international rugby for doing that. They're not any better than they would have been as a training session instead on the Saturday. And that's a real shame. Portugal should never have been put in that situation. And yet you come back to, another thing mentioned by Lena D and Saya, is what was the point of this fixture? What was the goal of this fixture, right? And you then put that England A game you mentioned is actually a very astute pull, because both of those cases, Portugal arranged a fixture that they clearly weren't prepared for, and they weren't ready for. And apparently the president of the Portuguese Rugby Union was interviewed on national radio a few days before this game, and one was asked what the goal of this game was, and he didn't really have a response. There was no clear vision for it, other than the fact that they can get Ireland to come and play here. So they went, brilliant, we'll take it. But the other thing was, in order to break even for this game, they needed 15,000 spectators, and they got about 8,000. So they didn't.
That's a lot of money they're losing.
They're losing a lot of money on this, as well as the reputational damage it's going to do.
The thing is, I'm not sure I agree with that whole thing of why did this game take place.
Yeah.
Because it should have been a good game, and it wasn't.
And so you have to come back to the rugby factors, because I think there's a lot of organisational stuff there that went on and didn't go well. Why are they paying that much for Ireland to come? Why are they playing in such a big stadium? Why aren't they organising this in a more sustainable manner?
Or do it in the autumn, where teams come to Europe rather than typically Ireland would go to somewhere in the southern hemisphere in the summer.
There are other complaints around the fact that the stadium announcer didn't announce the teams coming out with an anthem starting, around just little bits of organisation stuff on the day, which some of those things happen, some of those whatever, but when you put them in a whole picture, it starts to paint out quite wisely. However, the big question mark, right, is their selection of a coach. And Portugal selected one coach who was completely unheard of, out of absolutely nowhere, who then left a few months later, and they brought in Simon Mannix, who has very small coaching CV, has been working primarily as a pundit for a long time.
20 plus years, we're talking.
But has coached in New Zealand at, semi-pro levels, and a little bit at ITM Cup. A lot of it, as an assistant coach. But came in and gave a great pitch on his vision for the Portuguese team, what he wanted to do with them post that World Cup and how that team had played. And they gave it on the basis of his pitch, right? Rather than his ability to sell it, rather than his CV and what he'd done with rugby teams in the past. And you have to ask questions of that.
I hate to be too judgmental, because I've never been coached by Simon Mannix. I don't know much about what he's like as a coach. But we did the podcast looking at the 2007 World Cup. And he was a pundit on kind of just under half of the games, I'd say.
On a lot of them,
on that World Cup.
And most of Portugal's games.
Yes, most of Portugal's games. A very, very good point to bring that up. And a lot of the time he talked about heads-up rugby and playing what's in front of you.
There was almost no insight whatsoever into the game. And I understand you're a pundit. You
gave him Dick of the Day a few times, and so did I.
You're limited in what you can say and what you can point out, right? And on the Portuguese games, he was making jokes about, I can't believe Portugal play rugby. I'd never heard of Portuguese rugby. These players are amateur. Why aren't they off playing, working as vets or whatever? And
which one of them was, big up Rui Kadiro.
But it felt like a very strange fit when he was so down on Portuguese rugby publicly in 2007.
And don't get me wrong, this was...
it was 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
You don't want to, and obviously he's a different guy. He's worked and coached. He's done a lot since, and he has built up a coaching CV. And yet you wonder whether he was overpromoted. You've just had Andy Carrick, who's just come in as their forwards coach, and yet they were walked all over. Obviously, former Ulster hooker,
who's renowned as a decent coach as well.
Playing coaching championship level. And, But also, if Portugal want to be stepping up, right? What they want, you look at the teams that have made those big strides in terms of the next step up from where they were. They're incredibly smart at getting Patrice Legisquet in the first place.
What a coach he was.
Brilliant coach. Did a great job with them. They tried to get him back by all accounts. They struck gold there. And I feel like there's been a lot of organisational stuff that's led them not doing the due diligence. They've now hired 2 coaches in a row where you surely go, they've been a flop. And there was some success with Portugal. I don't know if you can put it all on this. I don't know if there's something else going on. It almost felt watching it like the players were ill and they couldn't physically tackle well enough. Because I know these players are better than this, but they had the shakes or something. It was just terrible.
They didn't allow themselves because, as I say, these are good players. And you would not believe that watching this game. There will be people, probably largely Irish fans who were there to watch Ireland, watching that game for Ireland, not having watched much of Portugal before, who will laugh at me for saying these are good players or this was a good team. And I stand by it. And yes,
you've seen them play other games.
They were awful.
And I think
they were dreadful.
There will be, in the coming years, stories of this game told. And we will hear Thomas Appleton's take. We will hear the other players and the sides' take. And what happened in the lead of this. We'll hear Simon Mannix's take. And whether there were other factors going on, because I think there had to be. I don't think you become a team that bad overnight. I think there will be a much more going on. I think the fallout of this game has to be huge. I think you've got to look at not just the coaching team, the players. The players, I think, it's tricky, but the coaching team you've definitely got to look at, because like someone else was getting these players to beat Fiji a year ago, or 2 years ago rather. But you've also got to look at the administration. And are they doing a good enough job? And the answer is unequivocally no. Like, if they're losing enormous amounts of money on the game, they lose by 100 points and kills interest in the sport.
Yeah. And they're clearly losing money to the point where they can't get in extremely high-level head coaches and so on. And they're having to compromise, which is really frustrating when you consider a couple of years ago, there was, when we did, for example, the video about Portugal leading into the World Cup, talking about how much the game has genuinely grown there, and yet it's taken such a backward step.
It will be easier to forget this game and move on and get them another game, considering they've already qualified for the next World Cup, than it was in 1995. When they missed their shot, they were humiliated doing it, and it led to the sport just like regressing for 10 years. However, the other warning story is 2007, when they went and spent all the money they made from the 2007 World Cup. They squandered all the goodwill and they ruined it. And it took the generation of kids who watched that and started playing rugby as a result to come through and develop.
Portela Junior, baby.
Yeah, but like, I'm just hoping it's not going to be Portugal for 2 World Cups and they squander everything and we have to wait 15 years for the next generation to come through.
Once again, I can't stress enough how much I looked at those team sheets and I went, I can't wait for Hugo Camacho versus Craig Casey. Because that is 2 great scrum halves who play at a million miles an hour with incredible skill sets, right? And it was just Craig Casey playing on his own.
Camacho's been playing so well.
He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's one of the most exciting talents in world rugby. And here we are. Just Craig Casey played without an opposite number.
I think it would be good to talk to some people and do a deep dive into what's going on with Portuguese rugby, because it is a state by the looks of things. That was like a true... I don't know if it's even beyond like canary in the coal mine. The coal mine's just collapsed. Like that is it. That is gone. They are thankfully qualified for the next World Cup, so that's taken some of the pressure off. However, they do need to start to look elsewhere and look at other results. And
as you say, somebody must be squandering money somewhere in there.
You look at like the most successful Tier 2 nations in terms of growing their base, right? Uruguay, Chile. The South American unions. One, they invested professionally in their own setups and adding club teams and so on. You look at what Pablo Lemoyne did with both teams in terms of developing them as professional sides.
It'd be nice if he was available.
They need to look at someone like that. Obviously at the time of Germany as well, where he did a great job. And then they collapsed when he left. Toby Booth's just gone to Hong Kong. They throw his name in the ring, throw him up. As a contender, but there must be other coaches out there who are either out of work and they can get in, or more likely you do what Uruguay did after Lemoyne and you go, right, and they had a meeting with Argentina as like what can we do together as coaches together. Argentina mentioned they had these coaches developing, and they mentioned perhaps the most promising of these is this young coach Esteban Meneses, and Uruguay went, say no more. And they approached him and they poached him on the basis of a recommendation from Daniel Hocade, the former Argentina coach, and their union. But it was very much like built through finding the best up-and-coming coach that speaks their language, right? And obviously Portuguese is a different task, but there will be up-and-coming coaches who are rated incredibly highly, who are suddenly offered either like they're brilliant assistant coaches and they're offered a head coach gig, and they're like, great, this is the step up I want, or brilliant club coaches who are offered a head international gig. And they've kind of got to go and like sniff someone out, but I reckon they'll probably just like wait for who applies and take the cheapest available, or not the cheapest, someone who comes on and gives a good PowerPoint presentation. Yeah,
that's the fear, isn't it? Is that they'll kind of skimp out on this again. And once again, like I'm just so alarmed that clearly there was some kind of outgoing on that was unnecessary. Because like even the Rugby Pass, and this isn't Rugby Pass's fault, like the Rugby Pass feed of that looked like it was filmed on a Nokia 3310.
The TMO cut out during the game.
The TMO cut out during the game. And Craig Casey just gave the referee a look of like, wait, what did you just say? We've got no TMO. And that was 20 minutes in. Literally just the line cut because the technology wasn't good enough in and around the stadium. And who knows, that might not be the Portuguese Rugby Union's fault, or the host's fault, or whoever. But there was no way that they could fix it. And it was while the referee was trying to check foul play,
I feel like the watch we've been doing on Canada might need to shift over to Portugal.
I hate that we're in this situation.
I know.
Because Portugal are a great rugby
Canada
nation.
lost to Belgium at the weekend, so what can we say?
It's true.
the one thing I do want to mention, right, because we won't do a full video on them, but Uruguay were playing Romania at the same time, and Romania, they were missing 20 frontline players, right? And like it was a depleted Romania team, so they've had 2 really poor results in a row for them. But Uruguay were brilliant. Uruguay were keeping pace with it. Admittedly, their game kicked off 10 minutes earlier, but they were for a long time. Like the scorelines were pretty much identical, and I was like, "Go on, Uruguay!" Uruguay was so much fun to watch. They were brilliant. Just like a mention for them. Santiago
Alvarez, what
the
a
scrum
guy.
half is superb. And with Arata obviously off on bloody being Antoine Dupont duty, like he is exceptional.
I desperately need by the next World Cup Santiago Arata to be able to learn to play a second position so they can just stick on Alvarez for the last 20 minutes and get him to play like outside centre. No, and get Arata to play like outside centre or something, just so you can have them both on the pitch at the same time. Because by the World Cup, we could be seeing their 2 best players being their 9s in a like Georgia 2019 situation.
Yeah. No, Uruguay were great. Just wanted to give a mention to them.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll do anything on Canada, Belgium, but Belgium were also really good fun. I really enjoyed watching them. Again, just great on the counter-attack, great at like broken field opportunities, which wasn't necessarily what they were doing in the Rugby Europe Championship, but the way they took their chances were really smart.
Yeah.
Canada got into a position where they should have won that game from there. And I think a lot of it is like belief is broken, and they feel a bit like Wales, kind of in tier 2 sense of like they've just forgotten how to win a game.
Sure.
And I think those Canada players are better than that, and they looked like better coached. And I think than they have for the last few years. Not as hard, but I think give them a bit of time, and hopefully they'll build on that. And USA losing to Spain as well, which is a huge result. And we want to do something on Spain soon. So
Very
probably
keen.
more on that soon. We've just done a video on the USA where I mentioned that game and what a great occasion it should be. It wasn't to be.
Yeah. Martiano Sian hype.
Yeah.
As always.
As always. That I think that's our parting thought, right? What Portugal should do is just get Martiano Sian to go and play for them.
It's not very often that we have to do a video as negative as that.
Yeah.
And again, if you're an Irish fan, I'm sorry. Like, I hope you enjoyed that. But I've seen a lot of Irish fans saying that they didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And like,
it became sad after a point.
I didn't enjoy watching that game. And it's rare that, on a long day of Test rugby where you're watching back-to-back international games and you go into a game going like, oh, this will be good. I get to watch Portugal play and like, get to see a really good Irish team, that I just outright didn't enjoy that game one bit. And
I know we've talked very little about the rugby itself, but some days they call for that. Some days you've got to look at it and go like, actually the problems are higher up.
Big up Big Bob Balakoon.